Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another episode of Rethink Culture, the podcast that shines a spotlight on leaders of businesses that put people first. My name is Andreas Constantinou. I'm a accidental micromanager turned servant leader over the years and who developed a personal passion for workplace culture. At Rethink Culture, will help companies build a high-performance culture by finding and fixing what stops their people from doing their best work. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Geoff Roberts. We were just talking about Geoff earlier and geeking out on culture. Geoff is the founder or co-founder of Outseta. Outseta is a platform to help you launch a subscription or membership service. And it's also a company that puts people first. In fact, things that every employee should think and act as an owner. Geoff was previously head of marketing at Building, the company that grew from startup to 20 million USD in ARR. He's currently traveling for the next 18 months as a digital nomad with his wife and twin 5-year-old boys, currently in Italy, and his favorite place on earth is the island of Sifnos in Greece. Geoff, very welcome to this episode of Rethink Culture.
Andreas, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So lots of things to talk about, but tell us a little bit about Outseta and what makes it weird and wonderful.
Sure. So Outseta is a 8-year-old software business that is structured and operates quite differently from your typical tech company. So when my co-founder Dimitri and I started this project, we had a few goals. One was to build a people-first business. Another, very specifically, was to keep the company as small as possible. And we said, if we want to do these things and still build a big, successful, and ambitious software product, what needs to be true? And we came up with what we call a choose your own adventure compensation model that kind of has three parts to it. The first one is the organization is flat and everybody is paid the same. So if you work full-time at Outseta, you earn $210,000 per year. And that's the same for everyone in the business. The second bit was everyone can choose to work anywhere from 1 to 5 days per week. So we wanted to make room for people that had other entrepreneurial projects or just weren't looking for full-time employment, but were great people nonetheless. And the third is everybody earns equity in the business to the extent that they want to and on the exact same terms as well. So while we have three people that started the business that we refer to as co-founders of the business, everybody is treated exactly the same way. And the compensation structure and the model and the equity are all designed to attract, really great, excellent people who want to work on the business long term.
So you must get a lot of WTFs, like raised eyebrows, when you tell that to other people. What are the common questions and how do you respond?
Yeah, it's funny. It depends who you're talking to, but if I'm talking to more of your, let's call it a young, traditional Silicon Valley type CEO, the question is usually just why. They're like, if you don't have any benefit over your employees, like what's the reason to co-found a business? You've sort of shoved away all of the potential upside that co-founders typically have. And I understand where that sentiment comes from, but I also think at our foundation is a belief that if we get the right people on the bus, we will build something that much more successful. And I think sort of the predominant culture in tech companies in particular is you've got a single founder or maybe two co-founders, and they kind of hold on to every last bit of equity that they possibly can and try to hire employees for as inexpensively as they can and get as much work out of them as they possibly can so their equity stake grows in value as much as possible. And that is certainly one approach, and maybe there are some benefits to that, but we're kind of flipping that on its head and saying, let's get all the best people that we can, because if we get all the best people that we can, we think we're actually going to build something better. That is probably the big one. The second one is just generally, I guess there's two. One is if you pay everybody the same, how do you incentivize people? There's no way that everybody is going to deliver equal value. And I readily admit, even in our company today, we're all paid the same. There's people that are more valuable than others. I think that is always going to be true, and that's okay. I think the key way that we combat that is everybody at Outseta is in ownership in the business in a meaningful way. So everyone is incentivized to give their all and help this business grow to the extent that it can, because they will materially participate in the success of the company. And then the last one comes back to the equity. We issue equity to employees immediately. It basically accrues as they work. And people see that as a huge risk. And there's certainly some risk there. Yes, we don't have an opportunity after a year to kind of back out and say, no, this isn't somebody we want to be giving ownership to. But it just means that we hire slowly and intentionally. And I think ultimately that is a good thing anyways. So those are the issues that commonly get cited.
Have you made any adjustments to the plan over the 8 years?
We really haven't. No, we started thinking about this stuff from day zero and codified it in an operating agreement. We have had conversations about do we need to change something? In particular, like, we don't have a structure conducive to hiring more junior people. And there's an argument that, there's benefits to hiring junior people from a cost perspective and whatnot. So we've had conversations about, do we need to introduce sort of a second tier to our compensation model where there's like the senior tier and the junior tier, but ultimately we have rejected that every time we've raised that discussion. We think it does create this weird class structure within the business, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid, frankly. So we've really leaned into the model fully, and if we're bumping up against something created by the model, it sort of forces us to think creatively about how we can maintain our way of operating and still solve the problem.
And I assume more junior positions you can outsource, or these days you can use AI.
Yeah. So AI is increasingly being used in the context of our business. I would not say we're like an over-the-top user of AI at this point, to be honest with you, even for being a tech company. We can use contractors, just like any other business. If there's specific tasks that we need to get done that don't warrant a full-time employee, we do use contractors at times. Things like podcast editing are an example of things we've used contractors for, but ultimately we look to a small team to perform all the work that needs to get done within the context of Outseta. And that does mean that we have very senior people doing what some might consider menial tasks. Specifically, like, everybody on our team does customer service and answers customer support tickets as they come in. And you could look at that and say, you've got software engineers with 25 years of experience answering customer service questions. Where's the ROI on that? But I see it through a different lens. First of all, it's not for everybody. We let people know this is the expectation early on, and you can sort of self-select in or self-select out if that's a problem for you. But secondarily, there's real benefits in terms of keeping everybody on our team close to our customers and close to the problems in the business. So I think, as with anything culture and organizational design related, there's pros and cons, but sort of putting these stakes in the ground allows people to opt in or out of whether this method of working resonates with them.
And your preference of working as a digital nomad, you were telling me earlier,
Yep.
every 2 years roughly you travel for 6 months.
Yep.
Even with young kids now.
Yeah.
Is that reflected among most of your people at Outseta?
I am certainly the most nomadic one. We don't have anybody else on the team that travels to the extent that I do. But I would say the people on our team, first of all, we're a very remote team. We've got people all over the place. And I think the people on our team all value their flexibility a lot. And a lot of their attraction to Outseta has been, we give them an environment where, with very minimal oversight and very minimal, restrictions on their time or when they're working or anything like that. They just have the flexibility to lead the life that they want to lead. And we're a small enough company that, there's nowhere to hide. Everybody works hard and everybody knows what work everybody else is completing. And again, I think it goes back to the ownership piece in particular. Alignment becomes very easy when everybody is an owner in a material way. It's a funny thing.
How do you respond to the big tech firms that are pulling people back into the office now? Do you have a view?
I think it's their prerogative. My own personal opinion is this idea that everybody needs to be in the same office is kind of a overbearing attempt to control people. And that just means that you have failed to build a remote culture that can work effectively in my mind. But I also I understand the benefits of co-located teams. I would be remiss to say that there are no benefits, but to me, there is no greater perk than remote work. And it's not just about, I can travel and, do my laundry during the day and those sorts of things. It's opening up the talent pool globally. It's having people from different cultures and different parts of the world on the team. It's all of these things. I can assure you that Outseta will never ask people to work in an office.
An interesting concept that really inspired me as I was reading about you before today was this concept of life profits.
Mm-hmm.
So do tell us more.
Yeah, so life profits, first of all, it's not my term. There's a South African entrepreneur named Adi Pienaar, who actually I have done some podcasting with on this topic if people are interested. It's called the Life Profits Podcast. But he sort of noticed that when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship, every founder knows exactly the business accounting or the financial accounting within their company. They can tell you their ARR and their MRR and their profit margins. And it is this very concrete thing that can be measured and is measured obsessively. We do not have a similar way to measure how much someone's job is enriching their lives. And Adi's point is, particularly if you're working on a startup or you're a founder of an early stage company, why are you doing this in the first place? Isn't the primary motivation for most of us to enrich our lives in some ways? And yes, that includes our pocketbooks and making money and all of that. But the ultimate goal of entrepreneurship should be enriching your life. And we have no method of measuring that whatsoever. So that's where this idea of life profitability came from. It's, let's look at our companies on two dimensions. Yes, the financial profitability of the business, but also the life profitability of the business. And as you're building a startup, sort of checkpointing, just as you would with your financial accounting, is this business making me miserable? Or is this business contributing to my life in a positive way? And I think the honest answer is there's an awful lot of entrepreneurs out there that are pretty darn miserable for long periods of time as they're building their companies, and they don't necessarily look at that and sort of assess that with clear eyes in the same way that they do the financial success of the business.
So how in practice do you measure life profits, and how do you encourage people to enjoy more of their life outside work or grow personally?
Yeah. So from a measurement perspective, I don't have a perfect system for you in any way. It's a hard thing to measure in general, right? Like how do you measure your happiness? You sort of don't. You just recognize it when you have it.
Yeah.
I think for me, how it has been useful is really just periodically thinking about this, thinking about my day-to-day work. Like, is it making me happy? Is it not? What's driving me crazy? How can I change that? And I'm the first one to tell you, Outseta is now an 8-year-old business, and it's profitable and things are going pretty well. But it took us a long time to get this company off the ground. we basically worked on Outseta for close to 4 years, seeing almost zero return.
Well,
And during that time, it was stressful. I had financial stress. I was working my butt off. It was just not all that fun, to be frank. And I think this concept just helped me kind of check myself and say, okay, why am I still doing this? What are the things that I can do differently to solve these problems? All that kind of stuff. It was just an opportunity to kind of have those checkpoints with myself and make sure that the juice was still worth the squeeze in a lot of ways. In terms of how we encourage this within our company itself, we just talk a lot about it. If you go to outseta.com/company, there's a whole page about how we operate and why we care about these things and all of that. And certainly, I think the co-founders have tried to lead by example, and everybody sees us taking time off and pursuing our passions outside of work and all those sorts of things. But I would also say we try not to dictate too much what that looks like to our employees. For me, it is the ability to travel around and be semi-nomadic and do those sorts of things. For other people, it's they, want to have horseback riding lessons at 2 to 5 p.m., 3 days a week. Like we try not to get too specific about it. But the mindset is very much like, go do the cool stuff that you want to do with your life. And if we give you the freedom to do that, we think you're going to show up and be engaged and do great work for us at Outseta. And that is very much proven true.
there's some people who have taken this a step further. So one of my favorite examples is Mind Valley. They have this 3 big questions, which they ask employees, which is how you want to grow, what you want to experience, and how you want to contribute to the world. And they have like a 1-pager for each person on their dreams. And then they, use that to know about their person, but also encourage each other to grow and help each other grow.
Awesome.
And there's some companies that have, quite a few actually, that have an official title of a dream manager. So the dream manager is like a mentor and coach to a cohort of employees who sit down and identify like what's one of their dreams. Like I want to pay out my loan.
Sure.
Or I want to buy a new car, or I want to, study architecture, whatever it is. And they coach them and in some cases support them financially to achieve their goals. And it becomes, how can I help you become a better person?
Yeah.
Because you work here and you are one of the team, but not because it'll have an immediate return on the business.
That's awesome. I love it. And I mean, think about yourself being that employee or that member of the team. How much loyalty does that breed? How much goodwill towards the employer does that breed? How much more is it going to make you cherish that relationship and work to maintain that relationship and make that relationship successful? To me, that is the missed opportunity with so many people that think, being a people-friendly business is beer on Fridays and ping pong tables and that kind of stuff. They're missing the point.
We talk about people bringing all of their selves to work, but we don't talk about how the company helps people shine in all aspects of their life.
Yep.
Which is the opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't bring your horse riding hobby to work, which you probably won't, or your love for painting, or your collection of beer bottles or whatever it is, how can we help you and inspire you to take that goal a step further?
Companies aren't even, 99% of companies aren't even thinking about there's a conversation where the company should be helping the employee do things outside of work. It's not even in their dialogue. It's how do we extract maximum value out of the employee?
Exactly.
That's all they're focused on.
Exactly. And unfortunately, it can't be measured. If it will be measured, then it'll be much easier to say, okay, yeah, I can increase my profits by helping people, fulfill their dreams, but it can't be measured.
Yep.
You earlier told me about an example which really inspired you about how your earlier co-founders, Dimitris and Michael, were role models, but when no one was watching. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I worked at a startup called Buildium, where I met my now co-founder Dimitri. And about 3 years into myself working at that business, they called me into their office one afternoon, sort of with no reason to, and to the extent that I was walking to their office feeling a bit apprehensive and wondering what I'd screwed up or if I was being fired or what it might be. And I went into their office, and they both had a smile on their face, and they told me they had just raised some money for the company for the first time, which took some chips off the table for them and created really their first financial windfall from the business. And they handed me a check that ended up paying off my student loans that I had at the time. And they just said, thank you for your hard work over the last 3 years. This is a small token of our appreciation of the efforts that you made. And, as a young person, it made a huge impact on me that there are people and leaders doing the right things when no one else is watching. This wasn't something that was, publicized to the rest of the company. It was just between me and them. And most importantly, they had no financial or legal obligation to do this whatsoever. This was money coming out of their own pockets that they were putting into mine because they chose to and thought it was the right thing to do. And just seeing that as a young person and knowing that there's people out there like that spoke volumes to me.
And it fascinates me because we talk about how we should be role models as leaders. And we assume that role modeling has to be in public because that's how you get some awareness and return from it, even
Sure.
if it's pure vanity. But when you do it in private, when no one's watching or just a single person is watching, there's no, there's no return, but there's only humility.
Yep.
And and that is just so respectful in my mind.
Absolutely.
Why is it important at Outseta that everyone does customer support?
Yeah, I think there's a couple thoughts behind it. One, I would be remiss to leave out, which is just we are a low price point product. There are things that we've had to do within our business to make the business viable. And one of those is we've just kind of said no to a lot of stuff that other companies typically take on. And I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but we have no investors, we have no sales team, we have no customer service team, we don't do budgeting, we don't have financial targets. Like we just kind of said, let's trim the fat, let's build great software, market it effectively, and provide good customer service. And if we do those things, the company will go somewhere. So it was an area where we just said, looking at other tech companies, they tend to build this customer service function. It is lower level employees. And oftentimes those employees are really just escalating issues to engineers or more senior people who can actually solve those issues. So we said, let's just cut out that layer altogether. Yes, this is going to result in a scenario where everyone has to do customer support, but it's also going to result in a scenario where if someone is coming to us with a question, the person responding to the question can actually solve the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to just sort of cut out this escalation layer that typically is present in customer service departments. Beyond that, it's very much about being close to the customer and their problems and making sure that leadership is still very much in the trenches and connected to what's going on in the business. Working in larger tech companies, I was always in these environments where there was so much focus put on user research and surveying customers, and like we need to study our target market and our customer to learn about them. And that all comes from a good place, but it also comes largely from these bigger companies that operate with a lot of hierarchy, where people doing the work or building the software or whatever it might be are disconnected from the problems of the users. And in Outseta today, every single person on the team is talking to customers every single day. And we could not be more intimately familiar with their struggles and their challenges and the things that we can do to make our product better for them. So I think there's so many sort of second order effects to keeping people intentionally close to the business in that way. And customer service is a really effective way of doing that.
So if everyone follows your advice or your example of not using market research, but speaking to customers, my other business, which is a market research business, would go out of business.
So there's nuance here too, right? Customer service is not one and the same as market research. There's differences here, and we could I'm sure have a nuanced discussion about this all day long. I do think in the context particularly of early stage software businesses, as well as one like Outseta, where we're building very well understood categories of software. We're a billing system, an email software, and a CRM. Customer service is a very effective way of telling us where the gaps in the product are and where we can make improvements. And it actually serves that research function pretty well.
Absolutely. I was going to stop you earlier and say, what? No financial targets? Like, this is completely counterintuitive.
Yep. There's no budgets, no forecasts, no financial targets. Certainly, like, we want to grow the business quick. We want to grow at a healthy rate, but we want to grow the business big and have financial success and all those sorts of things. Without question, the mindset is just, are creating arbitrary financial targets actually serving us, or is that just an attempt to control the future when we can't control the future? So the mindset we've really tried to push on people is just always do what's in the best long-term interest of the company, whatever we think that is. If we consistently do that over a long period of time, that will compound in a very meaningful way. And that's kind of how that's just how we operate to our core at this point.
And is this because you have a substantial profits, to put it simply, so that, when you need to hire, you don't think about so much the ROI of the hire, but you kind of believe that the hire will result in an upside long term? Like, how do you deal with investments where you normally need a budget? Because budgets are needed when you want to say, we need to grow by X in these kinds of skill sets, and therefore our cost base will increase, our revenues need to increase, and that's why you do all the calculations. So how do you work on these series of planning and thinking?
Yeah, so a couple things of note. The first is we're a bootstrap company, and we've sort of said almost no matter what, we're just going to remain a bootstrap company. So our ability to invest in anything is dictated by our ability to sign up more customers and generate more revenue. So that's our first constraint. We're not raising investment dollars and then saying this is an investment and we need to sort of model out the hypothetical ROI. We're constrained by bootstrapping. The second bit is everybody in the company has access to all financial information about the company. So they can see what's in our bank account. They can see what our expenses are. We actually publish our expenses for anybody interested on our blog. So everyone has all the information. And that means at a very tangible level, if myself or any other employee wants to make an investment in a new piece of software or to go to a conference or whatever it might be, if these are relatively small expenses, they recognize whether those are expenses we can absorb as a company easily, and they don't have to ask for permission. They just go and spend the money if they think it's going to be worthwhile for them. If it is a truly larger and significant investment in something that would eat into our available cash flow significantly, we bring it up and we talk about it in the context of the team. And again, everybody's hyper aware of our challenges. Everyone knows our financial standing. And if we've got sort of two competing priorities or opportunities to invest, we talk about it as a group and try to make the best decision possible. But it's really that simple. I think sort of, as I said earlier, like giving everybody equity creates enormous alignment. Just giving people all of the information on the business from a financial perspective solves an awful lot of these issues around budgeting or where to invest.
Right. And it closes the gap of us versus them
Totally.
because everyone thinks like an owner. So there's no owner versus employee.
Yep. And
So-
our hope is that we have spirited debate amongst the team. If two people come to us wanting to make a substantial investment, and you know they're sitting on different sides of the table and want to do different things, our hope is, because of everybody's ownership stake in the company and whatnot, we have a really spirited discussion about which one is going to make the better investment, and that has always proven true. We don't agree on everything, but I've never once in 8 years doubted that anybody on the team is advocating for anything other than the best interests of the collective team.
And given that you have some fairly unusual ways of working, what are some of the questions that new hires voice when they join?
Yeah, new hires. I think in general, the people that we have ended up hiring have been really fired up about this model. It's been a part of the reason that they have joined. Operating this way has resonated with them, and that's what's brought them to Outseta as much as anything else. I do think we've seen with some people at the start, they kind of jump onto the team and then they don't know what to do. They're kind of looking for that boss to say, okay, here's the way to structure your day. Here's what you should be doing next. Here's the priority project that you need to be sinking your teeth into. But we really just don't do that. We certainly have high-level conversations about, this is our strategy as a business. These are the things that are top of mind at the moment. We have backlogs of work for product and backlogs of work for marketing and all those things you see within the context of a typical company. But beyond that, it's really, we brought you onto this team because we think you're talented in X, Y, and Z. Take that skill set that you have, look at the things that we're trying to do as a business, and apply that skill set where you best can. And I think everybody has come to appreciate and embrace that, but it has taken some people a little while at the beginning just because it's so different from how they're used to operating.
Geoff, as we come to wrapping up the discussion here, what would you say to a leader who's not intentional about how they work with their people?
Yeah, I think this is, and generally you can talk about it being people first, or you can use the word organizational health. I think it's just the greatest strategic advantage that any business can build. So there are some businesses that just have great markets or some sort of major technological advantage that other businesses don't. And if you have those attributes in your company, fantastic, you should lean into those things. But I think any business, a huge catalyst for growth, a huge accelerant, a huge way to improve the business on every dimension is to be a more people-oriented company. And my personal perspective on that is just the more you support people and the things that they want to do with their lives outside of work, the more people are going to cherish the relationship with their employer, the more loyal they're going to be, the harder they're going to work. And it becomes this sort of symbiotic, harmonious relationship that makes the employee's life better. It makes the business more successful. And I think it just comes from a place of, you can have those benefits if you adopt this mindset and stop looking at your employees as a resource that you need to extract as much value out of as possible. So that would be my call to others, is to at least consider that may in fact be true.
And working more people find about you and your work, Geoff?
Yeah, you can look up Outseta. It's the word outset and then an A on the end .com. I'm on LinkedIn as well as Blue Sky these days. My name is Geoff with a G, so it's Geoff Roberts. But either place is a great place to find me.
Geoff, thank you for shining a light on a people-caring yet unconventional culture that you've built at Outseta, and your inspiration and foundation for all that. I hope many people are intrigued and inspired and maybe try and apply some of these principles at work. I certainly will. To everyone has been listening to us, thank you for giving us your undivided attention. If you liked the show as much as I enjoyed speaking and learning from Geoff here, please give us a 5-star review, because that's how more people get to discover and learn about the podcast. If you want to reach out, my email is andreas@rethinkculture.co if you want to suggest a guest or maybe ask about how can you build a high-performance culture. And like I like to say at the end of the podcasts, keep leading and keep building a better, healthier, happier, higher performing culture for you and especially for those around you. Take care.